He rebuffed all America's efforts to get the hostages released. 3 months after the embassy takeover, America imposed sanctions on Iran, freezing its US assets and banning its oil imports.
ما از اقتصادی نمی ترسیم، ما از دخالت نظامی نمی ترسیم. اون چیزی که ما را می ترساند وابستگی فرهنگی است.
They had 2 or 3 different interrogations teams that worked me over. I was beaten, I was hung by my wrists, marched into trees, and of course with a blindfold on. They'd tie me up like a pretzel and come in about every 15 minutes, give me a couple of good swift kicks, pull me to my feet, and ask me a bunch of stupid questions.
Good evening. For the first time since the Iran crisis began 40 days ago, President Carter has indicated a glimmer of hope in the conference.
The hopes were false, and news channels gave a daily reminder of the embassy siege. The Shah finished his medical treatment and left America, but Khomeini still refused to release the hostages.
Was seen around the world as an America no longer capable of dealing with her real problems. It humbled the administration in dealing with problems at home. It had a profound, prevailing, devastating, paralyzing impact upon our government.
I don't know how much longer we can sit here and see them kept captive while the situation around them does deteriorate.
He saw our honor at stake. He knew that we had to act, and he said so.
We began to figure out how we could extract the hostages from the Iranians.
Their rescue plan would test America's armed forces to the limit. It required 14 aircraft to cross hundreds of miles of Iran. After refueling in the desert, 8 helicopters would fly commandos to Tehran, where they would storm the embassy. A second group would seize an airbase outside the city. From here, the hostages would be flown home. The plan was known only to the president and a few of his top advisors. The Secretary of State, Cy Vance, was skeptical.
One day I remember he said, "Fritz, the rescue mission won't work." And I said, "Cy, how can you say that?" He said, "I say it because I was on the Armed Services Committee staff for years. I was over in the Defense Department for years. I've been around them a lot. This will not work."
When the Secretary of State was out of town, Carter summoned his top advisors.
We decided to have a national security meeting. Vance was in Miami. Warren Christopher was his representative.
The president turned to me and asked me to review the diplomatic options. Of course, the meeting had taken me totally by surprise. The subject was so secret that Secretary Vance had never been able to share with me the possibility of a rescue. And so I just dug into the back of my head and tried to review what the diplomatic options were at the present time.
All the principals, including myself, recommended that we proceed, that the diplomatic and other options were not working.
And we voted unanimously to proceed with the rescue mission.
To get the commandos in and all 52 hostages out required 6 helicopters. For safety, they sent 8.
The decision was made earlier. If we didn't have enough helicopters to bring all the hostages out, then we wouldn't bring any, because the ones remaining would undoubtedly be assassinated.
From an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea, the helicopters flew more than 500 miles into Iran. Keeping low to avoid radar, they flew into a sandstorm. 2 developed faults. When the others reached the desert rendezvous to refuel, a third was found to be damaged. That left only 5.
At that point, we decided to withdraw. And we left all our equipment there and brought our people home.
As they took off to leave, a helicopter collided with the refueling aircraft. The president was immediately informed.
I was with the president when we got the call, and the president said, have there been lives lost? And I saw his face turn white, and he said, I feared that.
5 airmen and 3 commandos died in the crash. A human tragedy, and in election year, a political disaster. Congress still knew nothing about the mission. It was the Vice President's job to inform its leaders before they heard the morning news.
You can imagine those very painful conversations. Awakened from a dead sleep, being told this, and they say, what are we doing? Where? When? How did we get into this? What do you mean lives lost?
I went on television the next morning, beginning at 6 o'clock, I believe, to tell the American people what happened, and it was all my fault.
It was my decision to attempt the rescue operation. It was my decision to cancel it when problems developed in the placement of our rescue team for a future rescue operation. The responsibility is fully my own.
کی این هلیکوپترهای آقای کارتر را ساقط کرد؟ ما ساقط کردیم؟ خدا ساقط کرد.
Although Khomeini crowed, the Islamic Republic's own armed forces were in disarray. Carter's sanctions stopped them obtaining spare parts. The Shah's generals had fled or been executed. Saddam Hussein saw an opportunity.
خدمت ایشون عرض کردم همیشه صدام داره زمزمه جنگ میکنه و او قرارداد الجزایر رو پاره کرده اینا، بنابراین هر چه زودتر جلوی این معنا گرفته بشه.
The Islamic Republic was surrounded by hostile states. To protect itself, it needed sanctions lifted. Khomeini was persuaded to open talks with America. His negotiator met President Carter's on neutral ground, in West Germany.
ما قدم می‌زدیم در باغ کاخ مهمان سرای وزارت خارجه بن که خبر دادن که دوستان آمدند. وقتی من آمدم آقای کریستوفر از رو آمد، من در قیافش تعجب رو می‌دیدم.
I was really quite surprised. He was a very good-looking, dapper man in a sport coat and flannel slacks, and so he looked very Americanized.
بعد از صحبت‌های اولیه و معارفه اولیه که بینمون صورت گرفت، شرط رو من عنوان کردم. یکی اینکه بازگردوندن دارایی‌های مسدود شده ایران و اموالی که یعنی تنخواهی که بر اساسش دولت پنتاگون تجهیزات نظامی به ایران فروخته بود.
With respect to the funds that we had frozen in the United States, I told him we had about $5.5 billion frozen, and we're prepared to assemble those assets and return them to Iran.
دو موردش رو خیلی تونستیم همون روز به نتیجه برسیم.
On day 2, they ran into their only sticking point, the Shah's personal fortune deposited in American banks.
استدلال من به آقای کریستوفر این بود که اولا این رقم درآمد معقول یک فردی نیست، ولو زمامدار، که پولی جای پسنداز کرده باشه. این رقم نزدیک به 20 میلیارد اموال منقول و غیر منقول، اینها خب تصاحبش غیر قانونی و غیر شرعی است.
I said, look, we have a real problem there. Under our constitution, we simply can't give back assets that are claimed by others.
آقای کریستوفر گفت من اینا رو به واشنگتن منتقل میکنم و در جلسه بعدی که خواهیم داشت مسئله رو پی میگیریم. دیگه اصلا خداحافظی کردیم بعد از 5-6 ساعت گفتگو.
It was September 22nd, 1980. It looked as if Carter could get the hostages home in time to boost his chance of re-election in November.
وقتی که من رفتم به فرودگاه، خلبان آمد که برج اجازه پرواز به ما نداده. گفتن که فرودگاه مهرآباد بمباران شده توسط نیروهای عراقی.
The next day, Iraq invaded Iran. 70,000 troops crossed the border, launching a war which would last 8 years and leave 1 million dead.